Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Claudia Hughes, and I'm the Associate Director of Advancement for the Faculty of Information at the University of Toronto. As we begin, I would like to acknowledge the land. I wish to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Faculty of Information for our Alumni Reunion Lecture, Artificial Intelligence, Innovations and Disruptions. Before we begin the panel discussion, I would like to take a moment to briefly introduce our faculty. The Faculty of Information at the University of Toronto is one of North America's top information schools, offering both undergraduate and graduate professional degrees, as well as an advanced doctoral research degree. We offer 5 degree programs that prepare students to work and thrive in the information fields: a Bachelor of Information, a Master of Information, a Master of Museum Studies, a combined degree program, and a PhD in Information. A few months ago, Dean Javed Mostafa released our faculty's new academic strategic plan that will set the course for a number of exciting innovations and changes over the next 5 years. The Claude T. Bissell building will also undergo a major renovation that will create innovative spaces and new ways for us to teach, connect, and engage with the iSchool community and beyond. We are excited at the number of wonderful things happening at our faculty, and we welcome you to join us on this journey. Before I introduce our esteemed panel, I have one housekeeping item. We have a hard stop at 6 p.m. as there will be a class entering at that time today. Following the panel discussion, we kindly ask that you promptly exit the auditorium. Our panelists will stick around in the foyer if you would like to meet with them there. It is now my privilege to introduce our moderator and panelists for today's discussion. Our moderator today is none other than our faculty's dean, Dr. Javed Mostafa. Javed completed his PhD in Information Science from the University of Texas at Austin in 1994 with a focus on developing information query models and search interfaces for video information. Currently, Javed is the Dean and Professor of Information Science at the University of Toronto's iSchool. As an academic, Javed has been a university teacher and administrator for about 30 years. Along the way, he has served as the Dean, an Associate Dean of Research, an Associate Dean of Academics, the founding leader of an interdisciplinary PhD and postdoc informatics training program, and an editor-in-chief of a major journal in his field. Our first panelist is Kaushar Mahetaji. Kaushar is a PhD student at the University of Toronto's Faculty of Information and a 2024-2025 Junior Massey Fellow. Kaushar's research examines how digital platforms regulate labor and exercise power by governing AI software. Specifically, she maps how social media platforms use AI-based software to manage their relationships with platform workers, such as creators and developers, and third parties, such as partners, advertisers, and data intermediaries. Her work draws on theoretical frameworks and methods from political economy, information systems, and strategic management, and underscores the importance of empirical analysis in studies of platform governance and platform power. Our second panelist is Dr. Vic Pant. Vic is the Chief Data Scientist of PwC Canada, where his primary focus is to champion PwC's data science and AI capabilities in the market and within the firm. He proactively advances the value propositions of PwC's differentiated portfolio of data science and AI services, including generative AI solutions to clients. As a partner in the data and cloud practice, he collaborates with clients to co-create the most value for their organizations through synergistic combinations and innovative applications of PwC Canada's capabilities in data science and AI with cloud services from AWS, GCP, and Microsoft. Vic graduated from the Faculty of Information with a PhD in Information in 2021. And last but not least, our third panelist is Dr. Periklis Andritsos. Periklis is an associate professor and MI director at the Faculty of Information, University of Toronto. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Electrical and Computer Engineering from Greece, as well as a Master of Science and PhD degrees in Computer Science from the University of Toronto. Periklis has extensive teaching experience in both Canada and Greece and throughout Europe, including Italy, Switzerland, and Greece. He is a co-founder of 2 Toronto-based startup companies and specializes in data science, data analytics, structure discovery, and customer journey analytics. His research has been recognized with 2 Best Paper Awards, and he is the holder of 3 industrial patents. Outside of academia, he is an avid tennis player and music enthusiast. And with that, I will now hand it over to Javed to begin our discussion.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your kind participation and attention this afternoon. We're very much looking forward to engaging, hopefully, in, dare I say, without putting too much pressure on our panelists, an exciting engagement. We are going to be talking about AI and its future and its current state of the art. Someone could move to the slide. I wanted to, there are many different ways we can engage in this topic. You may have seen the tagline that goes along with our faculty sometimes, which states, "We study information." It sounds a bit arrogant, but we do look at information from many different perspectives beyond just how information is computed on, which we believe is the realm of computer science. When we look at information flow, and I'm going to approach AI today from one of the angles, we have to ask broadly, what is AI giving to us? What is AI bringing to us that we cannot otherwise do? Perhaps, right? We don't have to, for sure, be the cheerleader for AI. That's not our goal. But we need to understand what it is offering, what is the power and the capacity of AI today in relation to where we are as humans, as communities, as societies, and why are we adopting AI? What is it giving to us that we otherwise cannot do? As a faculty, as a discipline that studies information, we have different kinds of perspectives we can bring. I could have started this whole context by showing you charts of the rate and pace of innovation and growth in research, and how difficult it has become to keep up with that space. But I'm starting more at a foundational level, at a biological level. And we know that our nervous system, which is responsible for our thinking, our cognitive aspect, our processing aspect of information, is just as important as our vascular system, which processes blood and other chemicals in our body. Can you move to the next step? So keep that in mind, that we are, just as we are chemical processing beings, we are also information processing beings, right? So a context that we have to think about is how quickly can we process information as information processing beings. And we have to do that to operate in the world, right? And now put that in context of what is the volume and the environment, the context of information. What is happening in our world in terms of information changes and growth, especially. And we're showing a growth curve here
volume of information, we have to invent almost new units to keep up with the growth. How we measure that volume, right? And we're just going to take the volume of information produced in a single day, which is 0.4 zettabytes. And if you take zettabytes, and you can see what does that actually mean? How should we understand 0.4 zettabytes? 0.4 zettabytes is 402 exabytes. Hone in on that second row, 402 exabytes. 1 exabyte is equal to 1 billion gigabytes, and 1 gigabyte is about 4,500 books, just to kind of as a reference point. That's how much information, broadly speaking, is produced on a single day. And if you look at the single year, can you imagine the volume that is being generated today? Now, let's go to the next slide. How fast a human being can process information as compared to compute devices, right? So, a general question to ask. It has been shown in a very interesting research paper recently published in Neuron by Caltech scientists. Through much exhaustive research, they have identified that how we as humans, turns out, are a very, relatively, very slow information processor. 10 bits, you know bits are zeros and ones, 10 bits per second is how fast we can process information. If you compare 10 bits per second to how much information processes through your regular YouTube video stream, that's 8 million bits per second. So internet and computing is so much more faster than us as human information processor. Do you see the gap, the challenge? So computing in some ways have already overtaken the way it transacts, transfers, and even computes information, right? So the question is this why partly that's driving more and more sophisticated computing and AI even to be adopted so quickly? I'll leave it up to you to answer that question. It seems at one level obvious, but at other levels it's more problematic. And we do need to understand this difference. What does it mean to be a slow information processor? And I think the questions are really important. If we just focus on quantity over quality, we will give more and more and delegate more and more of that processing over to machines as compared to us, and that could be problematic, right? So we need to figure out this inherent challenge that we have in the way we process information, in the way computing machines and devices process information. How do we balance that? So with that context, this is just one context, let's dive into today's discussion. And I will start off by asking all the panelists sort of a general question. As you know, from an AI context, as AI is developing so rapidly, what is the most significant way, in your opinion, is AI, without getting into perhaps specific use cases, even broadly, AI is shaping and impacting our lives? And how do you predict that kind of application of AI will evolve over time? So you can think about different segments of society, different types of human activities, where AI is showing to be having an impact, and how would that change? And I just start with that.
I know it's a complicated but broad question, but you may want to reflect on that. Any one of you.
Yeah, I can get started.
Yes.
So a lot of my research looks at the media industries and media companies. And something just extrapolating from that space is that there are a lot more questions now about what it means for information to be authentic. So our dean here talked about this idea that there's a lot of information and the speed at which we can process information is something we need to consider. If we think about what AI is doing in the media industries, for example, it's producing a lot of information that people do need to process, but at the same time, it's thinking about, is this information truthful, for example? So we need to be individuals that can better vet the information that we do have, and that's something that people are really concerned about, is thinking about things like misinformation, disinformation. So a lot of where do humans intervene in that process and deciding not just whether the information is valid or whether it's credible, but also whether it carries certain biases. So some of the information that we've had historically, for example, that information is now being used to create AI and to inform AI. So we're carrying those biases over. So what are some ways that we can think about how do we best mitigate some of the implications that has for our technologies? And just as individuals, even if we think about like recent election campaigns, how do we become people who have this sort of literacy? So a lot more emphasis on AI and digital literacy across spaces, not just the media industries, but becoming more familiar with how we as individuals interrogate that. And a lot of this, especially in the media industries, there's a lot of questions around what is not just credible content or authentic content, but what is human content? So what does it mean for something to be art? Do we consider something produced by AI to be art? So a lot of how do we interrogate information?
Thank you, Kaushar. Any one of you want to pick up?
Yeah, so my work is around data. So I will answer based on what we do, what we can do with data, and what we will be able potentially to do with data. When I was starting my studies, one of the biggest problems, that was in the early 2000s, one of the biggest problems that we had as students was, where is the data? Give me some data to analyze. And right now, we kind of don't have that problem anymore. We do have the problem of what do we do with the data. So I think one of the biggest changes that is happening and will keep on happening is the data-based, so decisions based on data, right? At every level, at the government level, at a personal level, at an organizational level, we are taking more decisions based on things that are happening around us, based on data. Artificial intelligence is a commodity term, is a term that we started using every day, and systems have it embedded in them. So we operate systems all the time where something pops up to help us make a better decision, right? So I think it's going to be more and more embedded in our everyday life, from mundane tasks to more complicated tasks. So I will finish my answer and we'll pick up on it later with the term that I think will be prevalent in the near future, and that is going to be called algorithmic governance. So taking decisions based on basically what these algorithms, these models are telling us is going to be more and more prevalent.
Thank you.
I can go next, Dean Mostafa. So before I go into the answer, I want to say I'm a very proud iSchool alum and very, very happy to be here. So thank you to the organizers for convening this session, and very proud to have Dean Mostafa as our new leader, taking us into the new generations of greatness for the iSchool. The iSchool Institute, the major Reno and the BI program. So thank you, Dean Mostafa. So I work with a lot of the businesses, large Canadian corporations across industries, public sector too, but a lot of my team and I, we work with banks, insurance companies, retailers, telecommunications companies. And so there's three quick things I'll say that I'm noticing my clients sort of gravitate to. So the first thing is that in previous eras of AI, let's call it machine learning or classical data science, These were very nice experiments. Different companies, different businesses scaled them, as in deployed them into production to different degrees. But now with large language models, this concept of generative AI and agentic AI, where tools are already getting fused by vendors with this notion of agentic interfaces, organizations are starting to understand value realization at scale. So that is to say that organizations are looking at AI not as a novelty, but as actually a source of competitive advantage and sustainability and growth. That's one. Two is we often hear about AI as in sort of as a risk creator when it comes to privacy, and surely there's concerns and considerations to be thought of. But what I'm seeing a lot of my privacy-aware, privacy-centric, safety-aware clients do, they're actually using AI to drive privacy in the enterprise. So to be sure, yes, we definitely want to be careful that there's fairness, there's de-biasing, there's explainability, interpretability, but AI itself as a source to drive that is a very interesting growth pattern that we're seeing. And the third thing which I'll very quickly say is traditionally, when businesses were deciding how to invest and what to invest in AI, it was always mostly focused on cost takeout. How can I have AI help me do things faster, more efficiently, fewer resources, bigger outputs? It was more of a cost play. Now with generative AI, agentic AI, I'm seeing my clients do more of revenue amplification type, market making, imagining possible futures, and also risk mitigation, which I touched on. So this idea of how AI value is being measured, how AI is being used to drive down risk while simultaneously mitigating the risks of that AI, and also AI as a revenue amplifier, not just a cost efficiency play. Those are three areas of growth.
Thank you so much, Vic. So let's try to get into a little bit more concreteness here. And Kaushar, you were talking about media, and perhaps you could expand that a bit to even entertainment and journalism. Maybe give us your notion of where you see AI having impact, but also where we need to begin to be a bit more critical in terms of how we're seeing AI change that landscape.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the media industries just generally are really interesting to look at when it comes to technologies, because a lot of the companies that are invested in the media industries, like the owner of Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp is Meta, they're also investing in all these other sectors. So they're investing in business and healthcare and education, and this is true with their AI technologies as well. So a lot of people refer to them as the canary in the gold mine. So I think it's important to look at these. And then in terms of how they're transforming the industry, so there seems to be no concrete position that people have taken in terms of AI. And one example we can think about when we think about this is the traditional news industry. So earlier on, when OpenAI really popularized, like through ChatGPT AI, just with consumers generally, journalists got really concerned, and a lot of the big news publishers, there were a lot of lawsuits that were put forward at the time. And the reason being is that to create these kinds of AI, you need data. And a lot of that data was coming from pre-existing publications from these traditional news publishers. So even with these lawsuits, now just this month recently, I believe the New York Times went back and they actually formed a partnership with Amazon. And now they're open and happy to have Amazon use their data, which they previously said no to be able to train proprietary AI models. So these models will not be open. So even just within the industry, there's this sort of reluctance in terms of taking a strong position. It's constantly changing, constantly evolving. In terms of the journalists themselves, so AI has already been incorporated, for example, text-to-speech, so things like accessibility, so it's not an inherent good or bad. In terms of entertainment, we're seeing a lot of AI adoption just on social media platforms. So this is including as if you're a consumer, but also if you're somebody who's a producer or a creator. And we're seeing during the pandemic, the creator economy might seem really small, but it's estimated to be worth $500 billion approximately by 2030. So a lot of these companies are also still investing in giving people the tools so that they themselves can create all kinds of content, whether they're a business, whether they're a news organization, or whether they're somebody who is at home. So this narrative around the democratization of cultural production or being able to create content.
Thank you, Kaushar. Very well put. I'm going to now pick on my colleague, Periklis. especially thinking about, maybe I'm sure you've reflected on what AI is doing in terms of its influence on learning and education. And perhaps you could share your thoughts about taking more of a balanced approach. Hopefully you can kind of think through and tell us, where do you see possible positive benefits, if there are benefits, and where do you see the challenges and potential problems?
Sure. So AI is my competitor in class lately. So I have to compete against all these systems when the students come and they tell me, ChatGPT told me that, ChatGPT told me this. Is that true? Like a lot of that stuff. Like it has become really, really part of the everyday life of students in class. So I have to constantly find new ways to, let's say, overcome that or do the appropriate. So there's a downside. The downside is that these systems are being overused, obviously, by students, and often without knowing the danger of using them just blindly, right? I post an assignment that is due in 3 weeks, and within 3 days I have half of the class having finished the assignment, and I go back into the classroom and I say, how did you know the answers, right? We haven't been doing that stuff yet. So there is the danger of losing touch with the principal ideas. And I keep telling the students that be careful, because if you blindly use these systems, it's okay in here, it's a safe environment, let's say, but if you go out there, you might be in great danger, right, if you lose the principle. So, but at the same time, there are a lot of advantages, right, that we shouldn't neglect. It's a good source of information, but people should use with caution. There are personalized learning initiatives. So the learning platforms could offer adaptive learning environments according to how the students are doing in order to help them advance. There are, for example, systems that democratize education. I have recently run across an article where students from Ethiopia are able to participate in online courses with a dynamic and online, like real-time translation of what is being taught in their own language. So, and that's on the fly, right? That's done through AI systems. So I think that I'd like to think positively that it's offering a lot of good to the students, but at the same time there should be a lot of caution and a lot of emphasis from our side, the academics, so that the students, the student body doesn't lose touch with the principles that we're trying to teach them. If you lose this connection, then in my opinion, you are in great danger out there.
Thank you so much. Some really interesting perspectives. And I think that spaces of learning and education broadly is going to be very fluid and dynamic for us to think through. From the perspective of thinking about industry and both sort of in the public sector, private sector, as you, PwC being global, do you see certain trends and patterns in terms of where industry's engagement with AI now and where it might be going? And in terms of globally, are there certain regions, certain areas that are adopting AI in certain, in their own unique and interesting ways that you could comment on?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. So what I've been noticing is that when we take an industry adoption view to this, we have reached that point where that crucible has been crossed where is this a nice to have or is this a must have? Most of the conversations I have now with members of board of directors or C-suite executives, it's not about should I be bringing generative AI or agentic AI into my enterprise. It's mostly how should I bring it in? Second question, what are my competitors or what are my peers doing in my industry to bring it into their enterprises? And third is, how are other adjacent organizations, my clients, my vendors, my suppliers, my customers, how are they bringing it in? So C-suite executives, board of director members, they move past, is this a nice to have or a must have? They realize it is a must have. It is now in some sense, it's a very interesting phenomenon because in a sense, Periklis, to your point, it's kind of commoditized in the sense that now everybody wants to have AI in their enterprise. But interestingly enough, it is also the source of competitive advantage and individual differentiation. So that is now a serious topic at conversation. We're seeing organizations hire chief AI officers who now sit right at the top of the house with CFOs, CTOs, and other such roles. That's one. And globally, what I'm finding is definitely, I mean, there are different regulatory regimes that are emerging, that are constraining and enabling in different ways what types of AI systems and what kinds of applications of them can be deployed. Number two, language is still a major factor because while yes, most large language models are pre-trained in English, but now organically we are seeing in the Middle East, we're seeing in Asia, we're seeing in other countries where English is not necessarily the primary language, large language models being trained in those languages as well. Because until then you have to use a large language model with a translator. So we're seeing language as sort of an inhibitor, but also as an accelerator to adoption of generative and agentic systems. And going back to Kaushar's point, technology availability is a very important thing too, because one thing I notice as I go from client to client in different parts of the world, the same AI service on one cloud provider in North America would be different than that same AI service from that same cloud provider in a different geography. Some of it is because of export control, some of it is because of market and commercial considerations. So there is a bit of a digital divide where there are affordances that are created where they're non-symmetrical and non-linear. So, but I think that companies and countries all over the world, they're seeing the value in Mostafa and they're really pushing hard to get AI into their economic systems as well.
Okay, thank you so much for those sort of broad use cases. And now I would sort of shift toward a little bit more critical way of thinking about AI and fundamentally where the technology is and where it's going. Now, I, as a information dean, I have to track and follow this at a different level. Just to give you a perspective, we're going to be launching a new degree in about 2 years, a new bachelor's degree. And of course, one of the things I have to think through is what are we going to teach in an information field to the next generation learners. And we have to think through what is the value or mission or strategic vision, how do they align with this degree. And information school really takes pride in, we always get this question, I said that we study information, but we always get this question, how are you guys different than engineering? How are you guys different than data science? How are you guys different than computer science? The way we differentiate information, and it has been so, there are 130 information schools and units around the world. The largest one actually is in Wuhan, China. So it's global. And if you ask your Uncle Google, or whatever you refer Google as, what are information schools? You'll find the iSchool consortium page, and you'll see they're all over the world. The way we distinguish ourselves is we take a much more societal and humanistic perspective on information and information technology. What does that mean? We try to train our students in a way that they understand information and information science and information technology in a deep enough way that they can become leaders in impacting
information and information technologies ultimate usage, so that we remain socially relevant and we remain relevant as humans also more fundamentally. We have a very ambitious sort of, I think, position that we see the value, information is the new currency, but we also have to lead with society and humans first, not technology first. We have to lead with society and humans first, not technology first. That's the position we take. That's how we are different than engineering and computing. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be stereotypical. I'm sure they're also interested in impacting society and humans, but that goes to the ethos and the history of our field.
Just a homicide.
Okay. So let me come back to where I see AI is moving fast and where the problems are. I see that based on what I'm learning, AI today, beyond large language models, we're already talking about so-called foundational models that can solve not just problems at a general level, fun problems like write me a poem, but actually do human diagnostics and disease detection at a population scale. That's not what your ChatGPT can do today. You have to build models at a much more sophisticated knowledge input. Today's GPT is based on what's crawled on the internet, what's publicly available. Most research-grade information is behind paywalls that are not publicly available, as you probably know. So imagine building foundational models that take research-grade biomedicine, complex biomedical information, but also take human electronic health record data at a very large scale, millions of individual records, and then build diagnostic models that can solve triaging for a complex hospital network. Those are foundation models. They're already saying that in about 2 years or so, we're going to have foundation models for different segments of industry, 2 years down the road. Now they're saying also, and when I say they, I mean experts, of course, and those that are deep in the industry of AI, as well as researchers. And you probably heard our friend Jeff Hinton talk about some of this. In about 4 to 5 years, we're talking about reaching artificial general intelligence, AGI. What does that mean? How is that different than foundational models? AGI, if you want to think about AGI simplistically, they say that's basically a PhD trained scientist. Okay? A PhD trained scientist in physics or biomedicine, that's an AGI. That's beyond the foundational model. Okay? That's about four years or so from now. 6 or 7 years from now, this is what you've heard Sam Altman, Elon, and many of the people we don't really like very much. I don't know. So, but and we have to take that with somewhat of a grain of salt. They're talking about artificial super intelligence, ASI, beyond AGI. 6, 7, 8 years. That's not very long from now. What does that mean? How is that different than AGI, than PhD trained scientists? That's some of artificial superintelligence is some of all the knowledge that's available today. So when we get to that level and how we get there, it matters, right? Who's going to have, let's not even think about ASIs, let's think about AGIs. Which entities are going to control and manage these AGIs? If you look at the players today, you can count them in one hand. So the consolidation in this industry is really worrying and concerning. There are only few players that can afford data farms and server farms and data centers of scale that can support that next generation of AGI level AI. We know that, right? They are telling us that. So it matters who controls that space, right? So I'm gonna ask my panelists, my esteemed panelists, to reflect a bit on governance and how we manage this trajectory. How should we manage it, right? Any thoughts, any ideas are welcome. And I'm gonna ask any one of you to reflect first. Okay?
I'm happy to go first with your permission. So this is something that I think about a lot, and a lot of my clients often bring up too, is nowadays there is on the one side there's a concentration, there's only a few large companies that control these large language models, but also if we see there's this also Cambrian explosion of lots of these small language models and specialized language models for finance versus retail, etc., etc. And so three things very quickly is when I talk to my clients, the first thing that they're talking about now is how do you define what good looks like? Because with traditional machine learning, what used to happen is you would have a training data set, you would use an algorithm to induce a model, and then you would have a test set, and you would basically measure the performance of that model based on the data you had held out. But now with a large language model that's been trained by some other company, when you bring it into your enterprise, how do you decide what the metrics are that you're going to use in your company to decide that Grok is better or worse than GPT is better or worse than Mistral is better or worse than Anthropic, etc., etc., etc. So I think iSchool, our graduates, they have the skills to build those types of measurement evaluation rubrics in a systematic and structured way. So that's topic number one. The second one is to Dean Mostafa's point is these models are probabilistic, they're stochastic, they change over time. So not every time they'll give you the same completion for the same prompt, but of course, behind the scenes, when these hosted models are updated away from the public eye, because that's their trade secret, that's their proprietary IP, that they are able to go from not just versions 3 to 3.5 to 4, but also within version 4 from release A to release B to release C, the behavior of the model changes. Sort of in machine learning, when we used to say the data drifts, the model shifts. So now we need folks with iSchool kind of viewpoints to be able to analyze and assess the drift of these large language models, which we have no control over training, unless you happen to be one of the companies that has enough resources to train your own models. There's a few of them, but 99.9% there aren't. And then the third part of this is ultimately tying the what to the so what. Because very often what happens is when data science teams, when AI engineering teams start to over-index and over-optimize on technical metrics, that perplexity, token entropy, self-consistency, the types of metrics you use to evaluate large language models, somebody else from the business side or the regulatory side might come in and say, wait a minute, you're telling me this model has lower perplexity, meaning it hallucinates less than this model, but you know what? From a business standpoint, I like that answer more than I like that answer. So how do you resolve those conflicts, right? How do you resolve a conflict? Because it's not like traditional machine learning where you could optimize for one variable. Here you have different variables, different metrics, better in some, worse in others. When you compare them, that's where the iSchool expertise comes in to really holistically evaluate, assess, and drive towards a favorable outcome.
Thank you. Anyone else wants to take on?
Yeah, sure, I can go. So a part of this governance that when we talk about technology is also thinking about what already exists in terms of the regulations we do have. And unfortunately, even if we think about digitization and the internet, what currently governs a lot of the companies that Dean Mostafa talked about that have so much power and concentration in Silicon Valley and the States is this specific clause in the Communications Decency Act. It's from the late 1990s when it was amended. And it basically said that these companies don't need to be responsible for the content they're publishing because they're just distributing the content, right? And these older regimes that we have in place, we do see that they're not currently working for the technologies that are emerging so quickly. So I think there is an issue there. There are areas like the European Union, which has its AI Act, where they do try to be more enforceable. But again, there's a lot more regulation that needs to be put in place, especially when these companies are operating globally. There has been ways that people have resisted So a really prominent example that comes out of the media industries is thinking about the Writers Guild of America and the Hollywood writers. So part of when they did go on strike in 2023, part of the reasoning was the fact that AI was going to be incorporated into the workspace, and that would affect their jobs and their job security. And they were successful with their strike at that time, and though that might be a temporary sort of protection for their work, there are ways that people have unionized and been able to form these kinds of labor, even if they don't have the power to create these kinds of technologies. So thinking about where can we intervene in the governance process.
Yes, I'll be quick. I could answer in one word: education. So I think before we talk about governance, about putting forward policies, about hallucination, training, and things like that, I think we should educate ourselves to understand how these systems work. I think, in my opinion, and I'm an ambassador of education overall, is that we should learn how a model is being trained. What does it mean to have a ChatGPT working, right? How do these systems start learning? Where do they learn from? You can have an absolutely lovely conversation with GPT, like a large language model. What is a large language model, right? Like maybe some of you don't know the term, so education is key. You can have a great philosophical conversation with a system like that, and you will think, wow, I learned something new. But is this new of good quality? Do we understand that these systems, they don't really feel, they don't really understand what philosophy is? What they just do is they know from, after scouring the whole web, what exists out there, what absolute keywords exist nearby. They do their calculations, their super duper multiplications, and they come up with something that they think is relevant to them. Whether it's relevant to us, we don't know. We don't know what we don't know, right? So a lot of stuff that's happening is under this other term that I use. It's the emergent ability. So they can, or they claim that they can do stuff that they haven't been trained upon, right? They produce new knowledge. So whether it is hallucination, like Vic said, or it can lead to something useful, I actually don't know, right? But before we get into all these details and all that stuff, I think we should invest into educating the people who are going to go into the workforce, and in general, the people who are going to start using or use this stuff to create policies, to do governance, and to take decisions on our behalf, right? How do they work is crucial, in my opinion.
Thank you so much. How much time do we have left?
You've got, I'll give you 5 more minutes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, yeah, I would, Claudia is always very cautious about putting me in this role because I tend to go off script and do a lot of other things. But I do wish to at least give our audience a chance to ask 1 or 2 questions in the remaining period, something maybe really burning you up and you want to ask. Go ahead. I think we can hear you if you stand up and. Yeah. Yeah, if you don't mind, just keep it short so we can give someone else a chance to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know with the current AI,
Yeah.
it grows the web, it takes from the knowledge we have now.
Yeah.
But with AESI,
Mhm.
it will have the ability to create, to think, to go beyond what we know.
Right.
So even if, let's say, Meta controls the ASI, how can it ensure that it won't outsmart it and take over the world?
Yeah. Wow, I'm laughing, but I'm crying. So I don't know how else to react to that. Obviously that won't be good to have, not just Meta, to have one entity to be able to have that level of control or power. But I think the fundamental assumption that ASI can just mere summation of all knowledge can predict new knowledge, we'll see. Can it or not, right? We're not there yet. And we have some fundamental, I think, rules and regulations that we must put in place in the meantime. I'm old enough to, I'm sorry, I'm about 100 years old, to be someone who has seen the internet appear while I was a student. So I'm pre-internet. And I remember, early days when I was a graduate student, even placing medical information online required a lot of caution and thought. And still now, you don't, just willy-nilly will find, hospitals or authoritative sources putting medical information online. There's a lot of course, health information online. But I remember that there were a lot of discussions around how do we validate health-related information? How do we put some type of a seal of approval or rating around health-related information? We have a lot more at stake than just the health-related information segment anymore. We need ways, rules, and regulations where answers are produced by these systems that we have confidence that this system has been vetted and there have been, certain expertise that have reviewed the content in certain ways so we can gain trust, right? And ironically, even Meta is claiming that, listen, we are a signee in this document that had been presented to governments that states that please regulate us, right? And and governments are trying to keep up, but the regulations aren't coming fast enough, and in a manner that incentivizes these industries to adopt those regulations and deploy them, right? So we really need to think through these things carefully now. So there was a question there.
Hi, yes. Just wondering, the rate of progress is accelerating every single day. And computers are becoming smarter, they're teaching themselves, and in the end, they're going to be taking over a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
What kind of jobs are going to be left?
Yes.
In the future?
Yeah, very important question. We're already seeing that happening in certain industries. Maybe I'm going to put my colleague Vic into on the hot seat. Could you reflect on what's going to happen to the workforce as AI is being adopted as you talk to leaders and C-suite folks?
Absolutely, and not to be glib about it, thank you, Javed Mostafa, not to be glib about it, but there's a saying that goes something like, AI won't take people's jobs, AI will take those people's jobs that don't use AI. So that's kind of a bit of a flippant statement, but that does seem to be a perception that is starting to take hold, in that all jobs today, to some degree, I shouldn't oversimplify, but most jobs today do have some connection to software, whether you're using email, whether you're using mapping, whether you're doing something. Providers of those tools are embedding AI, whether or not the users even know it or not, right? So for example, how your spam filtering works, but even now, Copilot actually suggests responses to your emails, right? So what's happening is that already now in many of the jobs that are information jobs, AI has already gotten embedded. So what I'm hearing from policy folks, but also from business executives is, what does the future of the workforce look like? Some of the folks will actually have to shift into roles that have to do with these three categories: trainers, sustainers, explainers, right? So models are behaving, doing what they do. You'll still need humans in the loop to explain, interpret, for transparency, for accountability, how it is that things got done. Second is you will need folks in your enterprise. For example, large language models are trained on general data, as everybody said. When you bring them to your bank, your telecommunications company, your retail company, your public sector organization, you have to ground them. You have to somehow set guardrails, you have to set safety nets. So that is a class of roles as well. And these are not necessarily technical roles, they can still be domain knowledge holders in the enterprise. And the last one are basically the trainers, the sustainers, and the explainers. Sustainers are typically the IT organizations and the other folks who will also have to upskill, because maintaining large language models, like Periklis was saying, is very different than classical database administration or app server administration. So it's a big topic of conversation. Happy to have it outside after the session ends.
Thank you so much. I think we have to close now. Claudia, we really appreciate all of your very thoughtful reflections and input. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Javed, Kaushar, Vic, and Periklis, for sharing your time and expertise on this ever-evolving and thought-provoking topic of artificial intelligence. Thank you all in the audience for joining us for today's discussion. We hope to see you again at a future Faculty of Information event. Now, as I mentioned, I kindly ask you now to promptly exit the room to allow our students to take their seats for their class at 6 p.m. We hope you have a good rest of the evening. Thank you for those of us who joined, and we'll have a reception upstairs for iSchool alumni very soon.